Okay, we're live. Avi, if you would like to join us.
I'm here. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. If you'd like to take it away.
Yes, absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Very nice to see everyone. Wishing everyone a Yom Yerushalayim Sameach. Really lovely to see everyone here on Zoom. So firstly, I just want to say a huge thank you to the Chief Rabbi Center for Community Excellence, who have made this event possible by sponsoring us this evening. A huge thank you goes to them for allowing us to have what will hopefully be a very lovely, very memorable evening and a wonderful way for us to commemorate and celebrate Yom Yerushalayim. With that, I also just want to say this is really the second part of our Yom Yerushalayim celebration. So I just want to say a huge thank you to Chazan Yossi for his wonderful service that he davened just a few minutes ago. If you haven't seen it, you can catch it up on our Facebook, on the Edgeware United public Facebook page. And then without further ado, we will move on to introduce Dr. Tovia Book, who will be speaking to us this evening. And more than speaking to us, he'll be taking us through a virtual tour of Yerushalayim. We've titled the talk, Jerusalem, the Eternal City of Miracles. And Dr. Tovia will be telling us a little bit about why we titled it that, but we'll be looking all throughout history at Jerusalem. And just to say a word about Dr. Tovia, thank him very much for joining us. He is an expert in all things Israel, having lectured all over the world about Israel, having been a licensed tour guide for many years. He was born very close at home in London, and then went on to serve in an elite combat unit in the Israeli army. So he has a lot of experience, and we're very much looking forward to hearing from him and seeing his tours. And I believe there will also be an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So I will pass to Tovia, and thank you very much once again.
Mute my audio. Hi, everyone. Chag Sameach from Modi'in, Israel. And so you won't be surprised after that introduction to be hearing the Queen's English. It is true, I was born in London. Actually, I wasn't born in London. I was born in Stoke Newington, in the Bearsted Hospital, where everyone else was born in London. But I did grow up in both South Africa and the UK, so I do have a slight South African accent. You're going to have to excuse that one. What we are going to focus on is what's very much in the news, not just because it's Yom Yerushalayim today. You're hearing about it in the news, and it's kind of surreal, because just a couple of days ago when I was making this video of you lovely people, I actually literally ran around the whole old city, including East Jerusalem, Damascus Gate, all these things you're hearing on the news, and it was really the silence before the storm. And that's what we're going to focus on tonight. We're going to literally do three things. I'll give you the introduction. One is we're going to go back in time travel. We're going to go to the famous Holy Land Hotel model in the Israel Museum and see how Jerusalem looked in all of its glory back in the year 66 CE, just before the Great Revolt started, when the Talmud tells us, who never saw Jerusalem, never saw a beautiful city. So we see Jerusalem frozen in time in the year 66. And then it's going to be very tiring for you armchair fitness people, but you're going to see the most interesting, relevant 5K dealing with Jerusalem, where my friend and I who's making the video is also a tour guide. He really does have a heavy South African accent. The two of us literally run around the whole old city to all the 7 open gates and the 1 closed gate. So you can have a look at them all from a couple of days ago, just so you can see how it all works out. And then we focus on 2 different places dealing with Jerusalem's ancient and modern history. So just before we get to the Dung Gate, Shah Ashpot, we make a sharp left and go into Ir David and see where it all began 3,000 years ago. And then we run into Shah Ashpot and we go to the Chafirot HaKotel, to the Western Wall excavations, otherwise known as the Davidson Center, and really see Tisha B'Av frozen in time from the year 70 CE. And from there, we finish off with the dramatic stories of the Tzanchanim, the paratroopers, of these young 19-year-old boys back in 1967. And as you all know, next week is Shavuot, and Shavuot was the first holiday, the first Aliyah L'Regel, the first of the Shlosha Regalim, the 3 holidays, that took place literally just after the Shechur, after the freeing of the Kotel. So it was a very emotional time back in 1967, when for the first time in almost 2 millennia, Jews could once again go up to the temple. And just today, actually, and a non sequitur kind of related, the most famous song of the Six-Day War is Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, Jerusalem of Gold. And the last verse was only added in after Jerusalem was actually reunified. So it used to finish, we can't go to the Temple Mount, we can't go down to, we no longer hear the shofar, etc., etc. And then after Naomi Shemer heard the scenes, and we're going to see some of this footage of Rabbi Goren blowing the shofar and Motar Gor shouting at Har Habayit Biyadenu, the Temple Mount in her hands. She was in the Sinai entertaining the troops, and she literally on the spot grabbed someone's back and took out a piece of paper and wrote the last verse of Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, Shum Shuv Nered Liyam HaMelech Derech Yericho, and we will once again hear the shofar blowing on Har Habayit. So all very interesting. And today I was actually on that road going down to the road, the Yericho road, going down to Yam HaMelech. So I was literally driving in the song today. So I wanted to start off with something ancient, and then we'll go to something, you know what they say, something old and something new. So I wanted to start off by showing you this very small thing in my hand. It happens to be, let me get in front of the camera, it's a pruta from the Great Revolt against the Romans. It's an original coin. 10 of these could buy a loaf of bread back in the between 66 and 70 CE. And on it is a symbol of a cup, a washing vessel the Levium would use in the temple. And it basically, around in ancient Hebrew and Paleo-Hebrew, those two words, Lecherut Yerushalayim, for the freedom of Jerusalem. And that's really what they were fighting for back in 67 CE. And that's what they were fighting for back in 1967 as well, for the freedom of Jerusalem. So we're going to start off our tour by going back to Jerusalem in the year 67. Now I see two people in this video, starting off very dry, but ending up very sweaty after the run. So we're starting off in the Israel Museum in the beautiful model of, it was called the Holy Land Hotel model because it used to be in the Holy Land Hotel. And when they rebuilt the Israel Museum with a huge makeover, they also brought the model into it. And what you're going to see is the way Jerusalem looked in 67 on a 1 to 50 scale, with all of the original topography, and it's based on primary sources. In other words, the Gemara like Masechet Midot, and also based on historians at the time, and most interestingly, also based on archaeology. So whenever they find new things, you'll see them a few months later moving things in the model to make sure that it's still accurate. So it's an absolutely fantastic way to really understand what Jerusalem looked like in all of its glory. And of course, back then in 67, the part that dominated the whole city was Har Habayit, was the Temple Mount itself, which literally took up 1/7 of the size of Jerusalem. And it says in the Gemara, Misha lo ra'a bet hodus, lo ra'a binyan ne'eh kol yomei chayav. Whoever never saw Herod's house, as in the temple, never saw a beautiful building all the days of their life. And even Josephus describes the Bet HaMikdash, the temple at the time, as had all this white imported marble. He said it looked like a mountain of snow covered with a golden crown. A beautiful dramatic description. If you want to try and understand what it looked like, join me and my friend Shmuel as we go back in time almost 2,000 years ago. We're now about to share the screen. Very exciting stuff. All right. And here we go. I'm going to take a break in the middle for questions. If you have any questions, write them on the comments section, everyone. We'll be able to read them in about 15 minutes when we take the first break.
Good morning, Shmuel Chantal, the running tour guide, together with Dr. Tovia Book. Welcome to Jerusalem. We're here to celebrate Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day, together with you. We're going to run around the walls of Jerusalem to see the open gates. The miracle of the fact that we have open gates today. We're going to connect you with its biblical past, but really celebrate this most magnificent period of our history. We've got the ability to connect, to understand, to live, and to appreciate this beautiful place, Yerushalayim. Chag Sameach.
what we can see here is a perfect reproduction of Jerusalem on a 1 to 50 scale. That means that a human being would look like a match head in this model. We're going to focus today on 67 CE, 1967 CE, separated by 1,900 years, two incredibly important dates for the Jewish people. And of course, the whole of Jerusalem is dominated by the Temple Mount, which took up 1/7 of the size of Jerusalem. And we're going to go around to take a closer look at that.
Welcome to the Old City. There is no excuse. Each one of us can run around the Old City walls. We're going to do a mini run around here, and just to point out from the model where we are, and then we'll plug you in when we get to the real stuff. So behind us, Jaffa Gate. Even further in the distance, you can of course see the Temple Mount and the Western Wall. But Tovia, why don't we take a run around and let's see the walls of the Old City. Let's head north. Right. Much easier. There's a good breeze.
Running conditions.
Okay, you can already start making
Wow,
out.
we're already running to Jerusalem. That was fast.
Wow. Welcome to East Jerusalem. You can see the Antonia Fortress coming up. We're at the northeastern corner of the Temple Mount. Oh, and we'll have a quick stop here. And look at the gates.
We
Now,
need a water break.
quick water break. We are going to take you to the 7 open gates of the Old City, but behind us, a closed gate. This is the 8th gate. This is the gate that's beyond. Shar Harachamim, the Mercy Gate or the Golden Gate. It's the entry into Jerusalem from the east, from Mount Olives, and that is the gate that we're all waiting and yearning to open. It's a gate that talks about redemption, Geula. Give us a quick feel as to the importance of this gate. And, you know, we're talking about 1967, Yom Yerushalayim. This was a yearning for a return to Jerusalem. What a wait. It was a long wait. And it's as if these gates are opening brick by brick.
The words that everybody remembers of the Six-Day War, religious, secular, people inside Israel, outside Israel, are the famous 3 words, Har Habayit Biadenu. The Temple Mountain is in our hands. Once again, after 1,900 years. And those words were said from this point overlooking the Temple Mount. And every time Jerusalem's been conquered, whether it's the Babylonians or the Romans, they've always come from the north. It's a lot easier to conquer downhill. And when the paratroopers came in for the first time, they didn't come from the north, rather they came from the Lion's Gate, which is actually on the eastern side of the Old City Wall. So we didn't enter as conquerors, we entered as redeemers, returning Jerusalem to the Jewish people. And very symbolically, we came in from the eastern side where the Gate of Mercy is.
Lest we forget, we're talking about gates, but of course, what is that yearning? It's the hope of the rebuilding of the temple. Just behind us, you can see the model of King Herod's second temple. He who has never seen the building of King Herod has never seen a beautiful thing in his entire life.
It's from the Talmud. And it was stunning. Josephus describes it as a white mountain of snow, the marble, covered with a golden crown. A beautiful image.
And there she is in all her glory. Okay, let's move on to the city of David. Briefly, you can see the hill on the south of Jerusalem. It's like a finger sticking down in the direction of the Kidron Valley. And this is the ancient part of the city of David, which is going to take you back to 3,000 years ago. A city that was conquered under the rule of David from the Jebusites. And so much to talk about here, but we're going to take you to the physical remains of the city. Now, let's run up Mount Zion.
Yalla.
Let's do it. Dung Gate, Sharashpot, and we've come around again to Jaffa Gate, but let's now head to the city. We're not going to run there today. We're going to hop in the car. Let's see you in a bit. The real thing coming up. And welcome, folks, to Jaffa Gate. We've made it to the Old City, and we're going to do our traditional run around the Old City walls for Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day. You can already see the festivities are in the air, and why not go? Let's go see it. Yalla. Proudly South African. Okay, here we are. Jaffa Gate, Shari Yafo, Bab el Khalil, restored by South African Jewry in 1969.
Go South Africa.
Hey, we're talking about a period in history, 1967, the Six-Day War. We come back to Jerusalem, the gates open, and that's what we're going to do with you. Run you around the walls, show you the open gates, and we'll give you the punchline in the city of David at Area G. Join with us. Off we go. Folks, number 2, Newgate. Opened up in the 19th century, leads straight into the Christian Quarter, and now we drop down to gate number 3 coming up. Gate number 3, Damascus Gate, Shara Shechem, Bab el Amud. Bab el Amud. Right, we'll take you to a special spot and a quick stop. Check down here. Tovia, what do we see?
We see here part of the original Roman gate that appears on the Madaba map. This was built by Hadrian for his city Aelia Capitolina, and he actually reused stones from the Second Temple that you can see over here. The bottom 5 courses here are all they've got the famous Herodian boss and margin, which is Herod's signature, and they were used to build the Romans' eternal city. But today, of course, the Romans have vanished and the Jews are back.
Great. Let's continue to number 4. Manishma, Boker Tov.
Baruch Hashem, יש לנו שומעים ששומעים על חומות ירושלים.
We've got guards on the gates of Jerusalem keeping us safe. You can see they are part of the Israeli border police. And changing of the guards happening right now. We have the guards speaking to the locals. Peace in our times. Please God. Okay, gate number 4 coming up. Herod's Gate. Shar Brachim, named after King Herod. Shar Brachim, Flowers Gate. Heading to Mambo number 5 next. Stay tuned. Here we are, the infamous, should I say famous, gate number 5, Lions Gate. Check out those lions.
He's not lying either.
No, Sultan Barbers, we won't get there, but let's talk about the gate 1967.
Right.
What a gate.
This is the famous gate. You've seen all this black and white footage of the paratroopers coming from Mount Scopus behind us to the east, coming towards the old city, and this is the entrance that came in. Remember that famous footage? They were in such a rush to get in that the first armored carrier actually got stuck in the gate. So the paratroopers climbed over it, went beside it, underneath it.
At 9:45 a.m., Colonel Mota Gore breached Lions Gate, and at 10 a.m., his voice crackled through the army radio, shouting ecstatic words that still ring in Israel's memory.
And it was incredible. They expected to meet huge resistance, but they didn't know that the night before, most of the Jordanian soldiers had already left. That famous footage of the Jewish people returning once again to the holy old city of Jerusalem took place through this gate behind us.
Lots of commotion at this gate, as well as Dung Gate, Sharashport, which we'll be getting to soon. Let's carry on. How about one more gate, a closed gate, not an open gate. Look at this. This is a trail taking you through the Muslim cemetery and coming up to a gate. This is a closed gate. This is what I call the 8th gate, next to Mount Olives. Let's take you up there. Wow, we could spend weeks uncovering the essence, the meaning, and the fact that the gate is closed, but we're going to give you a punchline as to what this gate really means. And just to place you quickly, behind us to the east, Mount Olives, Har Zaitim, and here we are facing west. So this is the eastern wall of the Temple Mount, and a gate that is blocked. Why is it blocked?
Well, basically, underneath this gate, it sits on top of a Herodian gate that was built during the time of the Second Temple. Some of the Herodian stones are visible below over here, the last 2 layers. And this is the main gate. The pilgrims came from the east into the temple. It was the shortest gate, shortest entranceway from here all the way up to Har HaBayit. And according to Jewish tradition, when the Messiah comes for the first time, the people who will be resurrected first are those who have the merit and honor to be buried over here on the Mount of Olives, which is the oldest continuous cemetery all the way from the first temple, second temple period, up to great leaders such as Menachem Begin. It's still very much in use. Okay, folks, over here, we can see where Herod added on a whole southern part of the Temple Mount. Very clearly, you can see the stones here from the Hasmonean temple. This Hasmonean second temple, and then there's a straight line, it's called the seam, and this is where Herod added on. You can even see part of an arch, which was part of an overpass. There's one we're going to see in Robertson's Arch, and this is the second overpass that will allow pilgrims who are coming from the east, from the Parthian Empire, to cross over the bridge onto the Temple Mount. So this is very clearly a Herodian addition. That's all for now, folks.
Just to get a sense of the size of this retaining wall, a real incredible structure today. Can you imagine what it was like 2,000 years ago to be standing next to these walls?
Wow.
Hey, welcome to the city of David. We're taking you to a special spot called Area G. Timing, there's a hive of activity here with youth coming to visit the spot. So we've taken you off the beaten track from the gates down into ancient Jerusalem. Welcome to the city of David. Look at these retaining walls. Boy, oh boy, lots to tell here. I'm going to get Tovia to share a little bit of the meaning of this place, especially connecting it with Yom Yerushalayim. It's an incredible day. Bring it on.
It's in the shade.
Okay, let's get to the shade then. Okay, before I hand you over to Tovia, who's relaxing in the shade for a little bit, I'm going to bring you into the picture. This retaining wall is really showing us a window into a period of history just before the destruction of the temple, 586 BCE. But we are looking at ruins from the first temple period. This hill was conquered under the rule of King David and settled around about 3,000 years ago. And so much has been excavated, so many signs are pointing to that period. And you can choose a subject of history to talk about here. But seeing that we are focused on Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day, a day when Jerusalem was liberated, the 6th of June, 1967, really changed world history, not only for the locals here in Jerusalem, but anybody that was yearning to connect with the city over millennia can now discuss this at the site, bringing us back to the beginning. So, Tovia, let's do this.
Hey, before we were back at the model where we saw a model of Jerusalem from 2,000 years ago, but what we're looking at right behind is Jerusalem from 3,000 years ago. Now, quite often when I come with groups to Israel, they come and they see a pile of stones and they go, it's there, just everywhere we go, it's like same stones, different place. And it's true, if you want to see impressive archaeological remains that look amazing, don't go to Israel. Go to Greece and see the Parthenon, go to Rome and see the Colosseum, go to Egypt and see the pyramids. Whilst this might not look physically impressive, for us as Jews, this is not just a history lesson, this is our story. These very stones saw the famous King David put these stones into place 3,000 years ago. And let us not forget, for 1 millennia, that's 1,000 years, 2 temples stood just to the north of us over here on Mount Moriah. The first temple period, which is these remains are from behind us, was of course started with Solomon, David's son, who built just to the north on Mount Moriah, the temple itself on the hill that his father had bought from Onad the Jebusite. Now, what was amazing is after the 6-day war, when the eastern part of Jerusalem was returned to the Jewish people, we had a huge amount of opportunities to finally uncover our past. As the Mishnah teaches us, know where we come from and know where we're going to. We didn't just appear in the land because of the Holocaust, as some people say. Rather, we have roots deeply entrenched in the land. It's very symbolic that just after the 6-day war, this area known as Shetach G, or Area G, was excavated by the famous archaeologist Yigal Shiloh. And he only had a very small piece where he could actually dig up clear land where there was no houses to destroy. And this is where he dug
And what he found gives solid proof to our roots deeply entrenched in this very land. And also, amongst other things, proved beyond any doubt the veracity and truth of the Tanakh, of the Bible itself. So let's see what we can see. We can see a very steep structure over here behind us. It goes up and it's very, very tall, made of massive monumental blocks. And this is the highest point of the city. And the book of Samuel says that King David built his palace on the highest point of the city. Now, what is amazing is that 500 years later, to fast forward to 586, the book of Kings talks about the destruction of Jerusalem, and it talks about the Jerusalem being burnt to the ground. And when Yigal Shiloh was excavated in 1967 after the Six-Day War, he found a massive, massive layer of soot about this thick on the ground. And when it was carbon dated to 586, to that very destruction. In other words, anything below that layer of soot was from the time of the actual Bible, Tukufat Tanakh. And he found in the soot charred Babylonian and Israelite arrowheads, which is a huge testimony to the ferocity of the final battle of Jerusalem. So anything below was below 586, solid. In this room behind me over here with the four pillars, known as the four-pillared room, a typical Israelite house, was very close to the king's palace, and therefore whatever was in that room must have been somehow connected to the palace. And underneath all of this soot, he found a whole room full of very, very small clay seals about this big, known as bulla. And they had them on inscriptions in Hebrew, not the Hebrew that we read today, but in biblical Paleo-Hebrew. And there were names of their owners who sealed them with their signet rings, and the same fire that had destroyed whatever scrolls or documents which they sealed had hardened the clay. So obviously, if you're a Jewish archaeologist excavating on a site of the Bible, you'll be looking for names that appear in the Bible itself. And incredibly, I just want to show you two of the seals that were found. There's this seal over here. Again, the real seal's about the size of my fingernail. But amazing, you can see there's a Hebrew inscription, ancient Hebrew. And what it says on it is Gemariyahu ben Shaphan, Shin Pei Nun, Shaphan in Paleo Hebrew. And what is amazing about that is this is a name of someone who actually appears in the Bible, in the Book of Kings. Gemariyahu Shaphan was a very minor character in the Book of Kings, who was one of the last king of Judah, Tzidkiyahu, who was the trusted servant. If such a minor character appears in archaeologically solid time capsule, it really gives testimony to the accuracy and truth of the Book of Kings. Finally, look at this thing over here. It's a square with a hole in the middle. Now, we know that Israel is the Holy Land, but the question is, what is that hole over there? Believe it or not, my friends, this is the remains of a toilet. Now, it might seem like I'm just talking about trivia, but this is very, very important to know how high in advance the status was of the people who had their own toilet over here next to their house, probably the scribe's house, the world scribe's house. And I want to conclude with an anecdote of the famous Victorian Prime Minister, Sir Benjamin Disraeli. As we all know, he was born a Jew and baptized to Christianity as a bar mitzvah present by his father, who didn't want to pay the 13 years of past dues to Bevis Mark Synagogue. So his bar mitzvah present became baptism. And many years later, he became the Prime Minister of England. And even though he was nominally a Christian, he was always very proud of his Jewish roots. Whenever something was going on in the Parliament, the insults were flying, it was just a matter of time before someone called him a dirty Jew. And once he responded, this relates to this level of civilization here, he said the following: when the right honourable of the opposition's ancestors were living in mud caves in an unknown island, mine was serving as priests in the Temple of Solomon. And this site over here shows us we have a lot to be proud of. It's all death and destruction, while the beauty, life, dancing and singing. We are the only people that can come back to our land, dig down and find 3,000 years of history all the way back to King David. Chag Sameach. Chag Sameach.
Okay. Hi guys. I'm just going to take a break now before the final dramatic 10 minutes of footage to ask if you guys have any questions so far. David, how do you want to do this? You know, the hand raise and then we could just unmute them.
If anybody would like to raise a virtual hand, you're very welcome to come and ask questions. Don't be shy. If you are shy, then pose a question in the chat room. Tovia would love to hear from you.
Absolutely.
He's with us here today from, well, he's a long way away, but he is with us.
Everyone spirit. Yeah, don't all shout out at once now.
We have Flora Frank, who's actually in Israel, though she's from Edgware, which the connection. So I will bring her in, and you can, Flora, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Also, my mother, Margaret.
I want to tell you, I'm so happy it's not a question. I want to thank you very much, because what's been going on in Yerushalayim at the moment, I was given strict orders I wasn't to leave the house, and it's also been very, very, very hot here. So I went out. So really, thank you. But now I ask you a question. This is nothing to do with Yom Yerushalayim. First of all, Chag Sameach. Are you any relation to Rabbi Leonard Book? Is it Book?
I'm related through marriage. My father married my mother, and I was born. Yeah, mum's on the thing. Margaret Book is my mum. You can see her on the screen.
I remember this lady from a long time. Margaret Book is who? Is your?
My mum, my maternal unit, my mater.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. Yes, I remember your mother from a long, long time ago. But, is she well?
You can ask her afterwards. Why don't you do the private chat?
Oh, I see. Okay. I didn't know. That's wonderful. Thank you. It was beautiful. It was fascinating. Fascinating.
Okay, we have another 10 minutes. I'm glad you appreciated that we took the 5-kilometer run in 40 degrees of heat, just for the greater benefit of the Edgware United Synagogue.
Thank you. While we're waiting for any other questions, Tovia, maybe you would like to tell people of your various links in Edgware while you're here.
Before that, I just wanted to show and tell with books. The 2 best books of the 6-Day Watch, want you guys to know, are this one over here, 6 Days of War by Michael Oren, which is a phenomenal book. He was a former ambassador to the United States. He also has a PhD in history from Princeton University, and he waited until the Israeli and Jordanian archives were declassified, and he went around and wrote probably the best book historically on the 6-Day War. Well worth a read, and you can see from both sides, Jordanian and Egyptian, and also the Syrian and also the Israeli side as well. Phenomenal. From an emotional point of view, I'd like to recommend this book, Like Dreamers, by Yossi Klein Halevi. That comes from the Pasuk, which is saying, benching, Hayinu kechomim, we were like dreamers when we returned to the temple. And this one, he focuses on the Pacific Paratroop Brigade that liberated Jerusalem. The first half of the book is, he gives a minute-by-minute play of what was going on, including all the backstories. And then he goes back 50 years later and interviews them. And some you'll see were religious, some were secular, about their memories and how that moment changed their lives forever. So these are 2 amazing books for you guys to look at for Yom Yerushalayim. Is there any relevant Jerusalem questions, or does anyone want any more genealogy here?
No, there are no questions. People in Edgware are very shy.
Apparently, yes.
They need to get out more. They've been used to staying at home for the last year.
Yeah, you have to speak up a bit, because I'm deaf in one ear and can't hear with the other. It's a bit fun. Anyway, quick Edgware links are that well, first of all, you probably know my cousin-in-law, Stephen, married to Deborah, who is my cousin, my first cousin. Bob really is my uncle. He's also on this as well. And my late grandfather, Chona Goldman, was the Chazan in Edgware United just after World War II, 1945, 46, 47. And he originally came from Poland. So lots of Edgware connections. And of course, my mother and grandmother and uncle and aunt grew up on Bull Cross Avenue, which I remember being quite close to Krasinski. And that is all my Edgware connections. Everyone happy now? Good. Nothing like Jewish geography.
Absolutely.
On the subject of geography, let's head back to Jerusalem. So what we've done till now is we've run around almost all the gates, but the one that's remaining to us is Shah Ashpot, or the Dung Gate. Now, in case you're wondering about the unusual name, Dung Gate, it's because that, according to the tradition, again, in the Gemara and Masechet Midot, that's where the refuse from the temple itself was taken out of. And this gate over here, 2 gates are famous for the 6-Day War. One gate was the Lion's Gate, that black and white footage of the paratroopers running in, but another unit circled the old city and came through the Dung Gate as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to run into the Dung Gate. And don't forget, this was taken just last week, this footage. So when you look at the news today, and all the balagan and what's happening today, it's kind of surreal that literally 3 days ago we were running around in this very sort of quiet, taking all this footage. And we're going to go through the Dung Gate. And what we're going to do is we're going to see the kotel, but not the kotel that you all know and love, the kotel that was literally underground until the Six-Day War. Or most people don't know, it's the actual kotel that you go to. Only the bottom 7 layers, the bottom visible 7 layers were built by Herod, and the top 2/3 were built by people who killed Jews. So we all go and pray in our holy site. The top 2/3 of the kotel were built by early Arabs, Crusaders, and later Arabs. And interestingly for the English people here, which is basically everyone, sorry, Barbara, which is basically the very, very top layer of the kotel. You know, I noticed it's much smaller white stones. That was put on by Sir Moses Montefiore, who didn't like the fact that it wasn't straight enough. So he basically leveled it off on the top in the 19th century. But it's fascinating that only the bottom 1/3 was actually built by Herod, and the top 2/3 were built by people who despised, killed, and hated, and murdered Jews. What is interesting, I'll just add this on before we go back into the footage, is that when the paratroopers came in, you've probably seen the pictures. We're going to see it again at the end. I actually have like another 30 seconds of footage at the end. They didn't come into the Kotel Plaza. What they came into is they came into a very narrow alleyway because there was a squatters quarter called the Mughrabi quarter in front of the Kotel, had been there for literally about a century. And in the entire British Mandate period, the only access to the Kotel was this very narrow alleyway, and the Jews were not allowed to do things related to prayer. In other words, blowing the shofar they couldn't do. They couldn't put a mechitza there. So all the old black and white pictures, see men and women praying together. They couldn't put on a table even to read the Torah from. And that's what it was like to pray in the Kotel during the British Mandate. And of course, as we know, in 1949, the Jordanians kicked out the Jews. They promised Jewish access to the holy places, which they then ignored for the next 19 years. So basically, these paratroopers are running into the city. They're the first Jews since 1948 to go back to the Kotel. And it's this teeny little alleyway. And they knew that 2 days later was going to be Shavuot. And they were expecting literally tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Jews to go up, because this was the first opportunity in 2,000 years. So without further ado, the army brought in bulldozers, bulldozed down the whole Mughrabi quarter, leveled off the plaza that we see today. And that would have been the opportunity to do what they didn't do, which is dig all the way down to Herodian Street. Because believe it or not, get ready for this, guys, there's another 14 layers of Kotel underneath the Kotel Plaza. But they were in such a hurry to open it up after 1967, they just exposed an additional layer and a half. So when you go to the Kotel today, you'll notice the bottom stone, the bottom 1.5 stones are slightly darker than the 5.5 layers on top, because they were exposed in 67. There was such massive pressure that they didn't actually get to dig all the way down to the 14 layers that's still below the ground. Where they did do it is the section where I'm about to take you to, on the southern part of the Western Wall, just south of the ramp that goes up to Har HaBayit itself. There, the archaeologists had free reign to dig, and they dug all the way down the Herodian Street and below it all the way down to the bedrock, which is not just where the Flintstones live, that's just where they couldn't go any lower. And that part of the wall is a lot more dramatic. You get much more sense of the scale and beauty of the supporting Western Wall in the clip you're about to see now, which again, till 1967 was all underground. So let's go now to the last part of our tour, which is that part of the Western Wall that was only exposed after the Six-Day War. And in my opinion, it's definitely the most dramatic section of wall, because amongst other things, you can actually see the street where our Jewish ancestors walked on 2,000 years ago. And it's just a beautiful, emotional place. And that's, by the way, where we had our son's bar mitzvah. Okay, let's go on to the last part. We've got another 9 minutes. You've got 9 minutes to think of some intelligent questions. No pressure. Okay, here goes.
Gate number 6. Oh, perfect timing. Down gate, Shara Sport. Unit from the army. Here we are. We've entered the old city, just like the Jerusalem Brigade in 1967. Celebrations begin. folks, we're coming up to our last gate, the final gate for today, the 7th open gate, Zion Gate. Shout Zion. Quick stop. Okay, stop the watch. Here we are. Look at the size of this gate, and it is littered with bullet holes from the Independence War, 1948, when Jerusalem was under siege, and these are the battles from the 1948 war. And we'll talk about this at the end of our vlog, how the paratroopers cried in 1967 when we finally liberated Jerusalem and broke through these walls and brought back Jerusalem. So I hope you enjoyed that little run around, just to give you a feel of the gates of the old city, a little bit of history in between. And you know, we have 7 open gates that lead into our head, our 2 eyes, our 2 nostrils, our mouth, and our 2 ears. Open gates, keep those gates clean. Allow good things in, guard your mouth, guard your eyes, listen to good things, smell good things, and speak good words, and bring back the sanctity of Jerusalem with the fact that we have 7 open gates that we now can guard. I mean, the capital of the state of Israel, Jerusalem. So, Amen. Amen. So we'll see you down at the Western Wall, where we'll close our vlog and speak about how the paratroopers come. Let's go. And here's a real Yom Yerushalayim Jerusalem Day scene. Yom Yerushalayim Sameach. Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael Chai. The city is alive. And there is a prophecy in the book of Zechariah, Tovia. I think this is a good time to mention one prophecy. We haven't mentioned the prophecy today. Let me stop my watch. How about talk about the prophecy of a time when you will see children playing on the streets of Jerusalem. And look at that. That was just a bunch of them right there.
Our old days are used as new. Once again, old people walk through the streets of Jerusalem, and the young people run on the streets, just as a prophecy foretold.
Prophecy of Zechariah. Check it out above. Jerusalem Spring, natural. What a way to get off at the end. Great place for the kids to swim. Shalom. Peace from Jerusalem. World. Center of Africa, Europe, and Asia. 3-globe map of Jerusalem. Under the globe. Woo-hoo. Jerusalem. Okay, we've arrived to the Western Wall. Excuse the scaffolding, they're busy doing renovations on the Western Wall, but we're here to point out these stones lying on the road from the Second Temple period. Why are they lying here? As if they haven't moved since that time. Have they moved since that time?
It's because they haven't moved.
That's right.
When I was growing up in the UK and in South Africa, when it was Tisha B'Av, it was very difficult to relate to. I remember just going to the shul and mumbling some prayers, but couldn't really relate to it. But what you can see here, my friends, is Tisha B'Av in the year 70, frozen in time. These are the massive stones from the Second Temple's western retaining wall that were thrown onto the street by the Roman 10th Legion on Tisha B'Av in the year 70 CE. They have remained frozen in time. So when you see this, you can really picture Tisha B'Av. This is Tisha B'Av in 3 dimensions.
Tisha B'Av to Yom Yerushalayim. We would not have seen these stones unless 1967 happened. Jerusalem was liberated. We've just come through the gate, Dun Gate. The Jerusalem Brigade broke through. Lions Gate, the paratroopers came in. They liberated the Western Wall. And post that period, the diggings began. And archaeologists slowly made their way until they revealed these stones lying here from its destruction. So from destruction to renovation, to rebuilding, to see these scaffoldings is actually a good sight because we're yearning for even more. We've heard the sounds of construction. These are all signs of a rebuilding, of a returning, which was that time. Yom Yerushalayim brought us back, and here we are, and the paratroopers' cries.
And the amazing thing here, before we talk about the paratroopers' cries, amongst all of these stones, the archaeologists found, believe it or not, in the week of Tisha B'Av in 1969, a pillar, very much similar to the pillars we see behind us, but this pillar had a Latin inscription on. It was a Roman victory pillar. It's now the entrance to the Davidson site, which we are right now. And on it is inscribed the name Vespasian, Imperial Caesar Vespasian, the 10th Roman Legion, LEXXRFR, and this was a victory column when the Romans proudly erected it on top of the ruins of the temple, and a Jewish archaeologist 1,900 years later in the week of Tisha B'Av found this column that had been destroyed and in ruins, just like the Roman Empire itself, but the Jewish people came back. And amongst the Jews who came back were those paratroopers of 1967. Now, with those paratroopers, one of them was a guy called Chaim Guri, who later on went to be a renowned poet in the state of Israel. And he was with them. He was embedded in them. He was one of these paratroopers. And an amazing thing happened. These battle-hardened young boys of 19 ran to the wall. And they'd been in firefights for days. They'd seen comrades fall. They ran through the alleyways without showing emotion. The emotion hit them once they touched the stone to the wall. There was a reporter who was with them from Kol Yisrael, and I remember hearing the recording, and he says on the recording in Hebrew, "Eneni Adam Dati, aval ani nogea bavnei hakotel." I'm not a religious man, but I'm touching the stones of the wall. And you could hear his voice cracking with emotion. It was the one moment that everybody remembers. Just after the 6-day war, a book was written called The Seventh Day, which is soldiers' reflections on the wall. And everyone but everybody remembers exactly where they were when they heard the words, Har Habayit Bi'adenu. And again, as soon as these paratroopers came to the wall, which back then didn't have a huge plaza in front of it, the party seat behind me was still underground, but the western wall over there, this thin narrow alleyway, that's when they started to cry. And Chaim Guri wrote a poem called the Tzanchanim Bochim, the paratroopers cry. And part of the poem starts off with, this wall has seen Caesars rise and Caesars fall. This wall has felt the petition of mourning women between its stone. This wall has seen so much, yet never before has this wall seen paratroopers cry. And he describes the moment how they ran through the alleyways like the fiery chariots of Elijah, looking for the wall, and with soot-covered faces, battle-hardened, weary, no rest, they finally touched the wall, and then they started to cry. But that crying turned into song. Hazorim Bedima Barina Yiktsaru. Those that sow in tears will reap in joy. And why is it that they danced? Why is it they felt this weight? Perhaps because these young boys of 19, born with the state of Israel, carry on their shoulders 2,000 years. Welcome back home. Chag Yom Yerushalayim Sameach.
And may the weight on our shoulders be lifted as we reveal the glory of Jerusalem step by step, day by day, year after year. And may we all see the coming of our redemption and a rebuilt Jerusalem with a city that is knit together from all sides, and that each one of you play a part in its story and its future. We're wishing you again, Chag Sameach. Come and visit us, the city of hope, the city of light.
Chazak u'Baruch.
Chazak, chazak, chazak.
Okay. It's very difficult to see that footage without getting, as they say in the good Jewish language, verklempt, right? That last piece of the paratroopers coming in. And what's amazing, especially when you read in the book of Yossi Klein Halevi, just how many crazy stories there were in that moment as the paratroopers were coming down. I just wanted to share one quick story with you whilst you think of some questions. And that was that, as I mentioned before, the Dreamers was written by Yossi Klein Halevi. Someone asked me who wrote that book. And some of the paratroopers were religious, and some of them were secular. So, but they were all there together, and it's it's fascinating. It's the same I can tell you just from my army service as well. That when you go to the army and put on that IDF uniform, no one says, excuse me, are you religious or secular, or Ashkenazi or Sephardi, or a new immigrant or veteran Israeli? Are you rich? Are you poor? How observant are you? Because once you put that uniform on, you're there for one purpose and one purpose alone, and that's Lahagen al Moledet, to protect the homeland. So when he went around and interviewed people, the religious people had some hilarious things. First of all, there's that famous picture of Rabbi Goren holding the shofar. And if you hear the recording, you can hear someone blowing the shofar. But very few people know it's not Rabbi Goren, because he was so verklempt, he couldn't actually get enough air in his lungs to blow the shofar. So there was one of the secular paratroopers was next to him from a kibbutz HaShomer HaTzair, which is a super left-wing so anti-religious kibbutz. And he said to the rabbi, who was the IDF chaplain at the time, oh, by the way, I'm a trumpet blower in a band, so why don't you give me the shofar? I'll see if I can get a sound out of it. So when you actually hear the recording, it sounds like someone blowing the trumpet. It's not like a tekiah and a shvarim and a truah, because this guy had never heard a shofar in his life. But he figured, because I've got lungs, I can blow a trumpet. So that's one funny story, that the guy who blew the trumpet wasn't Rabbi Goren, it was the secular kibbutznik next to him. Another very interesting story is there was a young student of Merkaz Harav. His name was Yoel Ben Nun. Now he's a famous rabbi in Israel. Back then he was a boy in his early 20s, and they came racing into Lion's Gate onto Harabah, and he suddenly stopped and he started explaining to the secular soldier next to him, this is where the Ezrat Nashim was, the woman's court, this is where the Levites' court was. And the guy said, like, how do you know all of this? Because back then they just saw like the gold dome of the rock. He said, because that's the last thing I was learning in yeshiva before I was called up for the war. So like he'd been learning it in the Gemara, and suddenly he just saw it on the Temple Mount itself, which is pretty amazing. And then the funny story is someone told him that there was two old men, civilian old men with beards at the wall. So let me tell you who the men were, and then I'll go back to Yoel Ben Nun. So Rabbi Goren's father-in-law was a famous rabbi called Hanazir, Rabbi David HaKohen, and he was a student of the Rabbi Avraham Yitzhak Kook. By this time in 67, he was an old man, and the reason he was called a Nazarite, because he'd taken on an oath, like Samson, never to cut his hair and never to drink alcohol. So that was his father-in-law, and he said, wow, my father-in-law, the student of Rabbi Kook, he has to be the first civilian at the wall, together with the Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Kook's son, Tzvi Yehuda Kook. So he sent his lieutenant, his adjutant, to go and pick them up, because he wanted, after paratroopers, the first civilians to be these two venerable Zionist rabbis, one the son of Rabbi Avraham Yitzhak Kook, the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel, the Rosh Yeshiva of Merkaz Harav, and the other one, his father-in-law, who was also a student. Now, just 2 weeks before the Six-Day War was Israel's Independence Day. And Rabbi Kook, Tzvi Yehuda Kook, was giving a regular Dvar Torah for Independence Day. And suddenly, as almost something possessed him, he started shouting out in Hebrew, where is our Shechem? Where is our Hebron? Where is our Har Habayit? Where is it? As if he was possessed, and someone actually recorded. I've seen the recording. And then 2 weeks later, Rabbi Goren sent this army jeep to pick them up. Now, nobody knew at the time, the civilians, that the Western Wall had been liberated, because the decision was literally taken on that morning. They thought they would have fierce resistance, but they didn't know the Jordanian army had actually retreated the night before. There's a lot of like quasi-miraculous things going on over here. And so the jeep comes screeching to a halt in the Nazir Rabbi David HaKohen's house. And in addition to not cutting his hair or drinking alcohol, he was also in the middle of something called the Ta'anit Dibur, which means he also wasn't speaking either. So he was a very, how should we say, a bit of an estate. And the guy comes in, this army guy, and says, I've been sent by Rabbi Goren, your son-in-law, to bring you to the Kotel. We just liberated it. Now, he couldn't answer him because he was having this fast of speaking, of not speaking. And he was in such shock. He was an old man then. He'd like a dreamer just started following him out of the house. He was in such a trance. He didn't even have his shoes on. He walked out in his socks. His wife came running out and gave him his shoes and put them on, got in the Jeep. Then they raced over to the house of Tzvi Yehuda Kook, Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook. And he also was in total shock. He could speak, but he was in total shock. And they then put on these helmets because they didn't know if there would be any Jordanian snipers or anything. We're talking about hours after Kotel was liberated, the same day. And they raced towards the Temple Mount. And another paratrooper who later would be very famous in the Gush Emunim movement, Hanan Porat, thought that he saw Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook in a Jeep with an army helmet, this old man with a white beard driving past him. He thought he must be hallucinating because of the battle trauma. And then this other guy on top of Temple Mount heard this rumor that two old men with beards, rabbis, were at the Western Wall. So what did he think? Because in this age of miracles and wonders, what do you think he thought who they were? Obviously, it's the Messiah with Elijah the prophet at the Western Wall, because we just liberated the Western Wall after 2,000 years. So he was sure, that's it, this is the end of days, the Mashiach is going to come, and Yom Shekulo Shabbat, we're going to have one big Shabbat. So he races down to the Western Wall and sees his only Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook and there, but it's just a very funny moment. And all that comes in this book, Like Dreamers, where it's not just like a book of history, it's also like a book of all these little anecdotes as well. But it's very, very, very special times. And I just wanted to finish off, because I started with the coin, I want to finish with the coin, to coin a phrase. And there's this coin over here. So this coin was a copy of a coin minted by the Romans when they destroyed Jerusalem in the year 70. It's the infamous Judea Capta coin. And the Romans, once they destroyed Judea, they basically minted this coin as Judea Capta. Now, you don't need to be a Latin scholar with an A in A-level Latin to realize that means Judea is being captured. And the image you see is the palm tree symbolizing Judea, and a Roman soldier standing up to show the proud Roman soldier. And at the bottom, you see a woman weeping. Sham yashavnu v'bachinu. We sat down and we wept. And this coin was sent all over the Roman Empire because the Romans were very proud of their work. And of course, they also built the Arch of Titus in Rome as well. Now, imagine 2,000 years ago, you went back in time as the Romans were destroying the temple and said, by the way, that temple you're busy destroying, well, in 2,000 years' time, the Jews will be back. They'll be praying on Yom Yerushalayim in Hebrew, and the Roman Empire will be dust and ashes. How would that Roman soldier have reacted? He would have had a good laugh and probably given you a smiley face in your neck with his sword. But that's what happened 2,000 years later when the Jews came back. They minted this coin. On it, it says in Latin, Israel liberata. Israel has been liberated. And the bottom in Hebrew, Lechevut Yisrael. And you see the same palm tree, but the Roman soldier has vanished, just like the Romans. And the weeping woman is now standing up, holding a baby in the air to show the rebirth of the Jewish people. And her husband, who's very well trained on his knees there next to her, is busy planting a sapling to show the rebirth of the Jewish people in their land. And really, this is why on Yom Yerushalayim we say Hallel, or at least I say Hallel, full Hallel with the bracha, because these are miraculous times we live in. We live in ages of miracles and wonders. And the most popular bumper sticker after the 6-Day War, even amongst the secular Israelis, was a sentence, Yisrael batach b'Hashem Israel u'maginam hu, that Israel trusts in God. He is their shield and their savior. Because there was no rational explanation how just before the 6-Day War, people thought there was going to be a second Holocaust. If you all remember that time, they were digging mass graves. The Arab leaders all around Israel were very unsubtle in what they wanted to do to finish off Hitler's job and drive the Jews into sea. And in 6 glorious days against all the odds, I should even say in 3 hours, it was a 3-hour walk. That's when the entire Arab Air Force was destroyed basically on the ground. Israel became 3 times bigger, and Jerusalem was returned in its entirety to the Jewish people. So these are really ages of miracles and wonders. And a day like today, we should also Shechianu, that we live in the times that we live in and be full of tremendous hakamat tov and gratitude. But as the Gemara says, Asur lismoch al hanes, we shouldn't rely on miracles. These miracles happen because there was young 19-year-old boys who took Jewish history on their shoulders and came in and gave us back our land. And the young 18, 19, 20-year-old soldiers today who still stand on the borders, keeping our Zionist dream alive. So that's why I'd like to pay tribute to this particular presentation on Yom Yerushalayim, to the boys and girls of the IDF who are keeping our Zionism alive, not just for the Jews here in Israel, but the Jews around the world. We can all stand up strong and proud. Thank you very much, and Chag Sameach.
Thank you. I mean, that was very, very, very interesting, and the footage from '67 particularly moving. And as you said, it's secular, the Frum, no matter who, they were all together. That day, the pigeonholes disappeared and everybody was one. And that was fantastic. And the words I add to that are Am Yisrael Chai. And with that, I'd like to say thank you. But I know that Avi he's managed to get his phone reworking, and this is his event. So I'd like to bring Avi back in to thank you and to close for the evening.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. Just to say a huge thank you to Tovia. That was really, like David said, really, really inspirational. I found it very moving actually as well. And just to say, one of the things that I'm sure I felt, I'm sure everyone else has felt over the course of the pandemic, has been the kind of the physical and sometimes also emotional distance from Israel, because it feels like the world's further away in a way. So just that presentation, that video really made us feel like we were there, the best we can do at the moment. So really, thank you very much for taking us to Jerusalem with you, and we really, really appreciate it. And as I say, very, very moving and very inspirational. Just to say, before we move on, I'd like to say thank you very much to Tovia. Before we move on again, just a massive thank you to the Chief Rabbi's Community Center for Excellence, Center for Community Excellence, for sponsoring this event. And just on that note, while we're here, I just want to say we'll be having another event 3 weeks' time at the same time, on the 30th of May, which will be a big, also sponsored by the Chief Rabbi Center for Community Excellence, which will be a big bar and bat mitzvah celebration party for all those who've had their bar and bat mitzvahs during the pandemic. Of course, it's been very difficult for them. And as Tovia mentioned, a lot of the prophecies to do with Yerushalayim are all about the children, the youth growing up. The next generation is so important. And so in 3 weeks' time, we'll be celebrating all of their bar and bat mitzvahs with another Zoom event party. And more information will be coming out about that as well. And there'll be an address by Chief Rabbi Mervis at that. But just to finish the evening, just say another huge thank you to Tovia. Thank you very, very much for taking us along to Jerusalem with you.
Chag Sameach, everyone.
And thank you to everybody who was on here this evening. And Tovia, your mother is very proud of you. I've seen by all the messages that she's put up. So it's nice to have a bit of nachas in there as well. So, and again, thank you to everybody for being here. Stay well, and Yom Yerushalayim Sameach. And please God, we all have good health, and soon we should all be in Israel. And Lashona Haba B'Yerushalayim.
Amen. Bye.